The streets of America echo with an eerie stillness shattered only by the cries of those trapped in homelessness and addiction. For far too long, we've ignored the agony playing out right outside our own homes. Whole neighborhoods are crumbling, consumed by an endless loop of poverty and drugs with barely a glimmer of escape. As families fight to hang on, we must ask ourselves, how did we allow it to reach this point? And what can we possibly do to halt the destruction before it steals even more lives? Homelessness in America is no longer an issue limited to a few unfortunate souls. It has evolved into a nationwide crisis impacting millions across the nation. The number of people living without shelter keeps climbing, driven by skyrocketing housing prices, unaffordable health care, and deep-rooted failures in mental health care systems. Yet perhaps the most heartbreaking part of this growing epidemic is the destructive bond between homelessness and addiction.
Oh, that is crazy feeling, and it's not a fun feeling at all. When you wake up, you get very sick because it sucks all the drugs out of you, so you have nothing.
In many of America's most fragile communities, addiction serves as both a trigger and a result of homelessness. Drugs such as heroin, meth, and fentanyl have taken hold of entire neighborhoods, trapping people in a relentless cycle where escaping addiction feels as impossible as leaving the streets. Addiction often makes it far more difficult for people to secure or keep housing, and without stable shelter, the forces that drive addiction, stress, isolation, and lack of support only grow stronger. These communities, ravaged by both homelessness and the fentanyl epidemic, have turned into centers of despair where people struggle alone without the help or resources to rebuild their lives. Local governments and nonprofits have attempted to tackle the problem, but the crisis is so vast that many efforts have been short-lived or ineffective. The truth is, grim entire neighborhoods are being abandoned, forgotten by a system unable to handle the sheer scale of the catastrophe. And so the question lingers, can anything truly be done to stem the growing wave of homelessness and addiction in America? To grasp the depth of this crisis, we must look closely at the cities where homelessness and addiction are most severe. Let's now explore the top 5 cities carrying the heaviest burden of this national catastrophe. Skid Row in Los Angeles has become an unforgettable emblem of America's homelessness crisis. Situated in the center of downtown, this district shelters over 4,400 people in makeshift tents and shacks, while countless others sleep along the sidewalks. The tragedy of Skid Row isn't only the sheer number of homeless individuals, it's the deep link between addiction and homelessness that makes it so devastating. Addiction, especially to methamphetamine and fentanyl, isn't just a byproduct of street life in Skid Row. It's a driving force that worsens the crisis and makes escape nearly impossible. The streets are strewn with used needles drug gear and traces of a desperate cycle that traps people in survival mode.
Well, Skid Row is like, it's a trap. Even though they have resources to help you, but it's a trap because it's a lot of the world going on out here, as in drugs and prostitution and partying. And if you get caught up in that stuff, it could ruin your life. You know, and I came down here and unfortunately I got involved in it. And it took me to destruction.
Addiction magnifies the already unbearable weight of homelessness, while the absence of shelter and stability fuels even more addiction. It's a cruel loop, homelessness and addiction feeding one another with few lifelines strong enough to break it. In Skid Row, survival means more than finding a place to rest. It's about staying alive in a world that's turned its back on you. Why has Skid Row stayed ground zero for this catastrophe? The reasons are painfully obvious: systemic gaps in housing, inadequate mental health and addiction care, and missing long-term support. While programs like Home for All have made small strides in easing the pressure, they failed to strike at the roots of the issue. City responses have been fragmented, and without enduring solutions, Skid Row remains a reflection of everything broken in America's handling of homelessness and addiction. Until we tackle the core problems, skyrocketing housing costs, and the massive need for mental health care, Skid Row will continue to embody a nation avoiding its toughest truths. And the longer we delay taking real action, the deeper this crisis will dig into the soul of our cities. The Tenderloin district in San Francisco has long served as a stark reflection of the devastating collision between homelessness and addiction in America. For decades, this small yet infamous neighborhood has been ground zero for the opioid epidemic, with fentanyl tearing through the community and leaving destruction behind. The unmistakable grip of addiction hangs heavy in the air, where people openly wrestle with their demons, often right in plain view. From the scattered needles on the sidewalks to the hollow, vacant stares of those trapped in drug use, the Tenderloin stands as a haunting reminder of a society that's failed to reach those who need help most.
It sucks. It sucks to not have a place to belong. It sucks to not have your city that you love want to take care of you. I love San Francisco. I love being here. I love living here. I've said before that, you know, my footprints are embedded in the streets of San Francisco. I am San Francisco. I mean, my footsteps tell a story, and I don't want them to be forgotten just because I'm homeless, just because I'm having a hiccup in my life.
Homelessness here has become deeply rooted, a seemingly permanent part of the city's landscape. Rows of tents stretch along the streets, and temporary shelters like the San Francisco Navigation Centers offer brief refuge. But the solutions feel fleeting, overwhelmed by a crisis that keeps growing. Despite the efforts of local programs, the homeless population keeps climbing, driven not only by financial struggle, but by the relentless pull of addiction, especially fentanyl. These aren't merely people without homes. They are human beings whose lives have been completely unraveled by a crisis spinning out of control. What makes Tenderloin's reality especially heartbreaking is the glaring absence of lasting solutions. While short-term relief resources exist, they fail to confront the underlying issues: a chronic housing shortage, inadequate mental health care, and overstretched addiction recovery systems. In a city as prosperous as San Francisco, How can an entire neighborhood be left to suffer, defined by poverty and the scars of drug dependencies? This escalating tragedy forces a painful question. Can a city so wealthy, so technologically advanced, continue to turn away from its most vulnerable citizens? Without a unified, long-term approach to housing addiction and mental health, the Tenderloin will stay a mirror of America's wider homelessness crisis, a desperate call for action that must finally be answered. Mass and Cass, also called Methadone Mile, in Boston's South End, has become a heartbreaking emblem of where homelessness and addiction collide. Once a place for people to receive methadone treatment, it has now morphed into an open-air drug market, attracting those addicted to heroin, fentanyl, and other opioids. This area stands as ground zero for the opioid crisis, where the daily fight to survive on the streets is intensified by the constant presence of drugs and addiction. The situation at Mass and Cass is grim. Homelessness and addiction are so tightly connected that the area has grown increasingly unsafe. People without homes often end up trapped in a relentless cycle of substance abuse with limited resources to help them break free. The neighborhood is littered with used needles and overshadowed by despair as attempts to curb homelessness or provide treatment have shown little effect. Local officials and outreach groups have worked to ease the crisis through housing and recovery programs, but those efforts often fall short. The lack of unified action has left Mass and Cass to decay as a reflection of America's larger struggles with homelessness and addiction. The shortage of meaningful support, both for the homeless and those fighting addiction, exposes the city's failure to confront the roots of these intertwined issues. What makes Mass and Cass especially tragic is how deeply rooted the crisis has become. Addiction here is more than an individual fight. It's a shared burden woven into the identity of the community itself. Until there's a fundamental shift in how homelessness and addiction are addressed, Mass and Cass will remain a haunting symbol of what happens when communities are abandoned. Kensington, once a bustling working-class neighborhood in Philadelphia, now stands as one of the most haunting examples of where homelessness and addiction collide in America. Situated in the city's northeast, Kensington has gained infamy for its vast homeless population and the open-air drug markets that have spread dramatically in recent years. The streets of Kensington are not only filled with thousands of homeless individuals, but also serve as a front line in the war against the opioid crisis, especially heroin and fentanyl. According to recent reports, the area shelters more than 1,000 people living on the streets or in abandoned buildings, many battling severe substance addiction. The neighborhood is constantly alive with movement. Men, women, and even children navigating streets scattered with used needles, drug remnants, and makeshift camps. Despite continuous efforts by community groups and city officials to offer help, Kensington has become a microcosm of the wider struggle with addiction and homelessness in America. At the core of Kensington's crisis is the opioid epidemic, which has hit the community particularly hard. The use of heroin and fentanyl has risen at an alarming pace, with overdoses frequently occurring in broad daylight. Local healthcare networks, including treatment centers, are straining to meet the overwhelming demand for addiction services. The relentless cycle of addiction and homelessness continues to exhaust community resources, worsening the crisis and trapping many in dependency. Why then has Kensington become the epicenter of this growing tragedy? The reasons are complex. Kensington's proximity to major transport routes and its industrial past made it an ideal hub for drug trade, attracting those seeking cheap housing or temporary refuge. Moreover, the shortage of effective treatment options coupled with skyrocketing housing costs has left few lifelines for those trapped between homelessness and addiction. Attempts to tackle the crisis have included boosting police presence, expanding shelters, and launching programs focused on addiction recovery. Yet progress has been slow, and many believe these efforts only address the surface of a far deeper issue. Without confronting the root causes, poverty, mental illness, and the lack of affordable housing, any fix will remain painfully incomplete. Nestled in the heart of Seattle's lively Capitol Hill, Cal Anderson Park was once a thriving retreat. A lush haven where families gathered, children laughed, and the city's progressive pulse flourished. Now it stands as a heartbreaking emblem of America's homelessness crisis, where hope and despair wage a daily war beneath a sea of tents and tarps. Some 200-300 people now call this park home their improvised shelters, scattered across the lawns that once gleamed with perfection. But it's not just the encampments that haunt this city sanctuary. It's the unrelenting hold of addiction that traps so many in a waking nightmare. Fentanyl and methamphetamine have dug their claws deep into Cal Anderson Park, where tossed syringes and vacant eyes speak of survival against impossible odds. Here, homelessness and addiction aren't merely connected, they're entwined in a vicious dance, each feeding the other's hunger. Roughly 60% of the park's residents wrestle with substance abuse, fentanyl's deadly surge turning Capitol Hill's core into a grim battleground. The park's diverse community, many from LGBTQ+ and BIPOC groups, faces unique hardships. Their hopes for stability crushed by soaring rents, scarce mental health care, and a system that's turned away. Seattle's answer: a patchwork of stopgap fixes. The city's unified care team sweeps through clearing tents only for them to return within days, a Sisyphean loop that changes nothing. Temporary shelters and outreach teams bring flickers of hope, yet they're overwhelmed by the tidal wave of need. Affordable housing remains a fantasy in a city where tech wealth inflates costs and treatment centers strain under the weight of endless demand. Cal Anderson Park isn't merely a place, it's a reflection of America's neglect of its most vulnerable. What makes its tragedy so piercing is the contrast, a symbol of progress now reduced to a refuge of desperation, where the American dream lies buried beneath refuse and sorrow. The pleas for help echo louder here, amplified by diversity and endurance, yet muted by bureaucratic stagnation. Without sweeping reform, more housing, real recovery paths, and mental health care, Cal Anderson Park will remain a wound on Seattle's conscience proof of a nation adrift. Time is running out to rewrite its story before more lives slip away. The ongoing crisis of homelessness and addiction in America is devastating not only because of the personal pain it inflicts, but because it exposes deep systemic flaws that have been left unaddressed for decades. As I witness these communities, Skid Row, Tenderloin, Mass., and Cass Kensington and Cal Anderson Park, it's impossible to ignore the link between the two. Homelessness and addiction are not separate problems, but part of a tangled web of societal neglect. Homelessness in America, in many instances, is not simply about lacking shelter, but about lacking opportunity for housing, healthcare, mental stability, and recovery from addiction. Those trapped in this crisis often endure a lifetime of systemic barriers that make escape nearly impossible. Affordable housing is scarce in most cities, while addiction treatment programs are drastically underfunded or overwhelmed by the magnitude of the problem. The outcome is a heartbreaking cycle in which homelessness breeds addiction, and addiction reinforces homelessness. From my standpoint, the roots of this crisis lie in decades of social policies that have consistently failed to prioritize the most vulnerable among us. Skyrocketing housing costs, stagnant wages, and insufficient mental health and addiction services have all fueled the rise in homelessness. Meanwhile, the opioid epidemic has devastated entire communities, turning neighborhoods into open-air drug zones and weaving addiction even deeper into the social fabric. Although many solutions have been suggested, from safe injection sites to expanded housing programs, the political determination to enact lasting systemic change remains insufficient. Until we as a collective society understand that homelessness and addiction are not moral shortcomings but social challenges demanding compassion, action, and real reform, the crisis will only worsen. It's not merely about building more shelters. It's about tackling the root causes of poverty, addiction, and mental illness, and creating genuine paths toward recovery and stability. Conclusion. Homelessness in America is a profound moral issue that reflects the core of the nation's values and priorities. The struggle of those living on the streets, whether in Skid Row, Tenderloin, Mass., and Cass Kensington, or Cal Anderson Park, lays bare the systemic failures in addressing the intertwined crises of housing and addiction. Despite ongoing efforts to relieve the suffering of the homeless, these communities remain ensnared in a relentless cycle of poverty, addiction, and hopelessness. The question persists. Will the United States finally rise to confront these issues with the urgency they require? Until there is a genuine shift in policy and a commitment to tackling both the symptoms and the roots of homelessness and addiction, these neighborhoods will continue to stand as painful symbols of a society that abandons its most vulnerable. The time to act is now before these crises claim even more lives.